Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of The Platform. On this program, tonight we are going to discuss national issues. There are a number of issues that are burning in the country, and they are political in nature. And today on our program we are pleased to have the new chairman of the Free National Movement, Mr. Michael Pintard, who is well known around the Bahamas, and he was recently elected into that office, and he is spending a lot of time between New Providence and Grand Bahama now, we are told, organizing the party and perhaps preparing the party for the next general elections. It is our pleasure to have him as our guest on the program today. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Nice to have you. Congratulations on your appointment. I haven't seen you since you became the chairman of the party, and but we are not surprised that you won, and you won handedly.
Thank you very much, and of course I follow your shows quite regularly, both on radio and television, so I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Yes. Is this the first time that you've been in national office in the party?
Yes. In fact, I offered as an executive previously, and so I functioned at that level, but in terms of one of the major positions, yes.
Mm-hmm. What is the state of the Free National Movement today?
I think we're quite strong. The election was designed to settle the leadership issue and to ensure that the leadership is given a fresh mandate. Mm-hmm. That was accomplished. The present leader got overwhelming support, and the entire leadership team as well. And so we are quite confident that the vast majority of the membership is in support of the leader, have heard what the plan of action is, have participated in formulating the way forward, and we're ready to return to government. And more important than returning to government is to assist in the transformation of this country that's in the midst of a very difficult period.
Yeah. During the 70s, the motto of the Free National Movement was all together.
Yes.
And when you realize what went down in the last elections for officers of the party, with Loretta Butler Turner running against your leader, Dr. Minnis, and there were others who ran for other positions. You wonder whether or not that motto is true today in the FNM. Are you all together?
I would think so. I mean, in any political organization, there are likely to be persons who would march to the beat of their own drum. Mm-hmm. Notwithstanding that fact, I think any right-thinking journalist, political pundit who is examining the Free National Movement day to day, whether it's looking at the parliamentary group, examining any community action we take, such as the demonstration at Bank of the Bahamas, or looking at our retreat, it would be clear to them that the leadership of the party is lockstep together, and that the membership is giving enthusiastic support.
Mm-hmm. You know, I keep my ear to the ground, so to speak, and I hear from time to time that certain former parliamentarians, certain people who have been in the leadership of the FNM are not really enthusiastic about supporting Dr. Minnis. What is your response to that?
Well, again, I can only judge from the convention, and the former parliamentarians, some of whom have made public comments with respect to the jury being out on the leadership, were enthusiastically supporting the leader leading up to the convention. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that as persons make public statements, in essence, what they are seeking to accomplish is to ensure that the new leadership, or the leadership with a fresh mandate, is being as inclusive as possible. And in order to achieve that, some might feel they need to make public comments to represent whatever constituency is speaking to them. But I don't think that means that there is a lack of support. I think those persons that have fought for the party historically just simply wish to see the party completely unified, all of the the groups within the party that they're given an opportunity to offer service. And so it's always healthy to guard against any one particular group dominating to the exclusion of others. And so I think it's, oftentimes it's pretty healthy comments that are being made.
Mm-hmm. The party is being judged now based on your pronouncements on many issues. The public stance that you've taken on a series of issues over the last several months. 2.5 years since Mr. Christie and his government, they've been running the country. And obviously the FNM as an organization is really not impressed by what is going on in the country. But when you look at the specific issues, sometimes you wonder whether or not the party has a unified position on the specific issues. For instance, the issue of, you mentioned the Bank of the Bahamas. Some in your own organization believe that it was not in the national interest for the opposition to go or to the steps of a bank owned in the main by the Bahamian people and really shake the confidence of the bank with the things that the opposition said about the bank.
Well, that's interesting because I certainly have participated in all of the caucus sessions within the party, and to date I have not heard one objection. So when you say persons within the party, I'm not quite sure if you're referring to persons who may have served in the last administration who may have expressed that view off camera. But certainly not those persons who are presently in the lower or upper house. There was unanimous support. In fact, you would have seen the leader was flanked by his parliamentary colleagues, and of course those persons who elected officers of the party have had ample opportunity within the council, within the executive, to express a different view and did not.
But don't you think the party was overreaching in this particular instance?
Not at all.
Because, banks, they thrive on confidence.
Yes.
And the government owns 65% of the shares in the bank. And a party in opposition going to the bank, calling into question the board of directors or asking for the removal of the board of directors and the management team seems to be a vote of no confidence in the institution.
Well, there are several objectives that the leader articulated and other members of the team have articulated that goes beyond questioning whether or not the bank has appropriate leadership. And so if you'd permit me, I'd just like to go through a few of them. Well, first of all, this is not a matter that would have been discussed in the public domain had the officials of the bank or those that have oversight for the bank been transparent in the beginning. The reality is we are discussing the Bank of the Bahamas because there were several whistleblowers. And I might add, at least one of those whistleblowers' home was invaded by the police, which was quite ironic, since one would think that if you have a whistleblower, someone pointing out that there are challenges, the bank is facing very serious challenges, that's somebody that ought to be applauded and rewarded. And if there's anyone who you should pay close attention to, it should be those that presided over the bank getting in the state that it's in. But that aside, this came to the public's view because information was shared. Prior to that time, what we knew about the bank was that it was performing in an outstanding manner. In fact, the bank had won several awards, inclusive of international awards. Secondly, the bank had opened a branch in South Florida. Undoubtedly, it had expended a tremendous amount of resources, again, suggesting that it was in good standing at home and it sought to expand what was ordinarily a good operation.
Yeah.
Obviously, given what we have learned now, one now brings into question whether or not the bank was financially viable that justified that kind of investment.
Yeah, but Mr. Pintard, I don't want to cut you off, but when you take into consideration what has gone down through the recession of 2008 and beyond, you would appreciate why all banks in the Bahamas have gone through a very rough period. And there are other banks who are in worse position in terms of losses than the Bank of the Bahamas.
Except, I hear you, Mr. Jones, unfortunately, no empirical evidence has been presented to support that position. I would have thought, for example, had Mr. Christie held that view, that the recession accounted for Bank of the Bahamas and other banks' predicament, that he might have offered similar figures to support that point. But consider this for a moment. Mr. Christie had said two things with respect to when were these losses accrued. In previous discussions, he commented on the time when the Free National Movement was in government and seemed to have been supported in that position when he mentioned the Risk Management Department and the Credit Committee of 2009-2010. In fact, the outgoing managing director made the point that none of those persons are presently in place. Mr. Christie, however, more recently indicated that it's really only in the last few years that the losses mushroomed. And so we're unclear on exactly what is the timeline for the ballooning of these losses. So some greater transparency might help the public understand what period these losses accumulated. The additional point that is of concern is in removing $100 million, call it what it is only in the aftermath of financial services professionals, both locally and internationally, terming it a bailout, that the government has finally conceded and made the point that it's essentially, for all intents and purposes, a bailout.
Yes.
And again, a former Minister of State of Finance is retained to assist with drafting the policies, managing resolve, and he's a man, in my estimation, in the leader's estimation, of impeccable integrity. But in light of the predicament the bank is in, the controversy surrounding the state of the bank, one would have thought that the government would wish to steer clear of any appearances of conflict and would have appointed an independent Bahamian of equal talent who would have managed this process.
Yeah, but Mr. Pintard, Deloitte and Touche, an international accredited accounting firm.
I'm speaking about the Minister of State for Finance.
Yes, but he's chairman of Resolve.
Yes.
But the function of finding the money and collecting the funds is left to Deloitte and Touche.
And it's a company with great reputation. Right. The question would be, are we adding additional layers of cost to the Bahamian people? I mean, ultimately, Deloitte and Touche is going to hire a high-powered law firm to do much of its bidding. Was it not possible to ensure that the legal firm was hired from the break in order to recover funds, as legal firms often do?
But
and Deloitte and Touche could focus on the forensic audit, which would be quite useful since the central bank does not accept what has been reported to it by the Bank of the Bahamas.
No, we are talking about the collection of funds that are outstanding, and accounting firms do this all over.
Oh, without question. Right. So does law firms.
Right. But shouldn't you be giving the government some kudos for moving in that direction to clean up the bank? Well, because what transpired, the losses in the Bank of the Bahamas, it goes in the two administrations. Yeah. In the administration of the FNM when you were in office, and in the last 2.5 years, we assume. And so with the appointment of Deloitte and Touche and the establishment of Resolve, isn't that a step in the right direction?
Well, again, it's very difficult to say, because to date, Mr. Jones, as astute as you are as a journalist, you are unclear, as is the public, unclear on truly what the state of the bank is. We are not. I will give you a practical. I'll give you a practical example. $100 million was placed in Resolve. We are unclear of how many millions of dollars are still on the books of Bank of the Bahamas in bad loans. The government has indicated they are unprepared to one, reveal that. Two, we don't know how much of the bad loans that presently exist on the books belong to politically exposed persons.
Yes, but you see, Mr.
I mean, is that fair to say that we're unclear on those details?
Mr. Pintard,
Yeah.
the central bank is charged with monitoring banks in the Bahamas.
That's correct.
And the central bank recommended certain things to the government. I have seen members of the FNM asking for the information that you are asking for, asking the government to provide a list of people who, or organizations who owe the Bank of the Bahamas this money. So the FNM and your MPs are asking the government to really break the law, because it is against the law for the Bank of the Bahamas to give you the list of people who owe the Bank of the Bahamas. That is against the Bank Secrecy Act of the Bahamas.
Mr. Jones, I've heard that argument offered, and let's just say hypothetically, one wishes to accept that argument.
Yes.
What the bank secrecy laws do not prevent is for a sitting prime minister to do as the leader of the opposition did, which was to declare among the politically exposed persons who have loans at the Bank of the Bahamas, some of which are not being serviced, there are no sitting FNM members of parliament or senators.
But that's immaterial.
But it is.
That's not material.
No, it is material.
Not, you see, it's none of my business and none of the public's business on who owes the Bank of the Bahamas.
But it is.
That is none of my business.
But it is, and I'll share with you why.
As it is none of my business who owes First Caribbean or who owes Finco or the Royal Bank of Canada. That's none of the public's business.
Mr. Jones,
that is why we have bank secrecy.
Mr. Jones, here's why it is relevant.
Why is it relevant?
The public would be happy to learn whether or not public officials who are holding pivotal positions in the government, some of whom may in fact be overseeing the collection of their taxes, whether or not they themselves are honoring a commitment to the People's Bank. Furthermore,
wow.
Yeah, furthermore, a number of the persons who are seated, whether in cabinet or in the House of Assembly, certainly had an obligation to indicate in public disclosure whether or not they had the level of indebtedness that we know exists in the case of the Bank of the Bahamas. And here's the final point. Here's the final point, Mr.
Even
Jones.
if they want to declare that,
here's the final
they would
point.
not declare that, listen, I owe the Bank of the Bahamas $200,000. They don't do that.
Here's the final point. In the course of evaluating the challenges faced by the Bank of the Bahamas, a critical question needs to be answered. Was there any impropriety in the allocation of loans, the servicing of loans, or the attempts at recovering loans? In other words, have your political position given you any advantage in obtaining loans from the bank, given your position in government? And that's a relevant question. I think you would agree.
No, I don't agree with that at all. You're getting in the business of the Central Bank of the Bahamas, who is charged with bank regulation in the Bahamas.
Yes.
No bank is authorized to disclose the list of people who owe the bank any money. Not unless you are in default and they are advertising your property. They put your property in the newspapers. But it is improper and against the law for any bank to say that we have lost $100 million, but Michael Pintard owes $2 million, and Wendell Jones owes $1 million. That is against the law.
Mr. Jones, it is politically unwise for a prime minister. It is politically unwise.
You are asking the bank to break the law.
No, I'm not. We're simply, as the leader of the opposition, asked the prime minister, are you in a position to say whether or not it is accurate that a number of the very large loans of the banks were given to members of your party.
But that's an improper question.
It is not at
because
all an improper question.
I assume that there were loans in the Bank of the Bahamas also given to FNM officials.
Well, again, the leader clearly made the point that not one sitting FNM...
But how does he know?
Because every one of us have been asked.
No,
every one of us have been asked.
Did it go through the list of thousands of FNMs around the country?
He is overseeing a group of persons who are presently in place, and it is a reasonable question to ask. Given the financial straits of the bank and the country, are any of you not servicing any loans? Now, it is our understanding that some loans at 3.5 million, one all the way up to 28 million. Politician. Certainly, Mr. Jones, I think you would find that a bit disconcerting if you have public officials
Not at all.
who are exacting a pound of
Not
flesh through VAT and other means from this public, but they themselves are not living by the same rules they advocate for the rest of the Bahamas.
Not at all, because, Mr. Pintard, we are a country of laws and not of men.
Yes.
Laws and not of men. And if there's a politician in this country who owes the Bank of the Bahamas money, there are ways to get that politician to account and to pay. You sue them. You take them to the courts. And the courts will ensure that the bank gets what it's supposed to get. And so the opposition should allow the Bank of the Bahamas to use the legal process to sue whoever is in the government.
That's right.
For whatever money it is.
And what many residents have said is that it is the small man and woman who is sued, who is pursued for small sums of monies, while those that are oftentimes politically connected get away scot-free.
That is perception. That is not reality.
It is a reality, and we've had a good opportunity, Mr. Jones, to speak to any number of persons who have been down that road. And so to go back to your original question, so when you talk about confidence, the Free National Movement believes that there are sufficient talented bankers, Bahamian bankers, who can assist the bank in designing a strategic plan to navigate out of this difficult situation. And our presence on the steps of the bank in a symbolic gesture does not weaken or erode public confidence. In fact, it is the absence of a candid discussion about what is needed to move the bank forward that weakens the confidence of the public.
Except, Mr. Pintard, that the Free National Movement ought to have accepted some responsibility for the state of the bank. Since 2 years ago, it was your administration that put in place the board of directors and the chairman and the rest of it. You have to accept that in the last 20 years, that the FNM has been in power for 15 of the last 20 years.
Mr.
And so if the bank had difficulty over the last 20 years, the Free National Movement in government must take responsibility for the last 15 years of the current situation.
Dr. Hubert Minnis made the point that we ought to do a forensic audit. We should be very clear in the investigation, and we should let the chips fall where they may. And I think that is a leader who is accepting full responsibility and is making the point that regardless of who was in power, what is important is that we ought to have accountability and transparency in how we manage the people's money. But I would say this, to Mr. Ingram's credit, had there been a revelation in the public domain about an institution that he had oversight for, Mr. Ingram's position would not have been to have officers go to the house of a chairman of another political party to seize computers and telephones to see where he got the information from. He would have immediately sought to get to the bottom of how this occurred to ensure that it does not happen again.
But I don't want to leave this subject, but you are assuming that when the police went to the home of the chairman, that the police got a political directive to do so. And Mr. Pintard, you don't have any evidence that the police got a political directive to do so. The police, in investigating certain allegations that appeared in the newspapers, did what they did.
I would say that you have an intended will and a permissive will, I would suggest to you, I would find it very surprising, let me say that, Mr. Jones, it may be a better way to put it, I would find it very surprising that no political figure was involved in terms of whether giving instruction or being aware and not seeking to discourage, within my estimation, was an illegal search and seizure.
Anyway, we have to take a break here because we have some other issues we have to talk about. We take this break on the program. We are speaking with the chairman of the Free National Movement, Michael Pintard. We'll come right back.